It was 3 a.m. when my front door was kicked open. 4 men dressed as fake cops barged in, yelling HOA enforcement. They assumed they were about to intimidate another frightened family. They were dead wrong. What they didn't expect was that my 17-year-old son possessed skills beyond their comprehension. And what they really didn't see coming was that our quiet little neighborhood was about to witness the most dramatic takedown in its history. By sunrise, their entire operation would come crashing down. Never underestimate a father who's defending his family. Have you ever been pushed so far that fighting back became your only option? Tell me in the comments. Looking back now, I realize how foolish I was to think this whole nightmare began with a minor parking ticket. Let me rewind and tell you how a regular software engineer like me ended up targeted by what I can only describe as the most vicious HOA scammer I've ever seen. It started 3 months ago, when I moved to Lakeside Manor, not because I had some secret mission to take down fraudsters, but because I was broke and had no other choice after what happened to Mrs. Rodriguez. Mrs. Rodriguez had been my elderly neighbor, 84 years old, in the apartment complex I used to live in, a kind soul who'd bring homemade tamales every Sunday for me and my son Connor. Ever since my wife passed away, she'd lived peacefully in her condo for 15 years, never missed a single HOA payment, never caused a disturbance. Then came a woman who, I swear, used the same tactics I'd later witness from Sofia Martinez. Suddenly, Mrs. Rodriguez was slapped with violation after violation: the wrong color mailbox, curtains that didn't match HOA aesthetics, patio furniture that wasn't approved. The fine stacked up at first $1,800, then $2,400, then $3,200, always the same suspicious amounts, and always for things that had never been a problem before. The stress consumed her. I mean that literally. Mrs. Rodriguez died of a heart attack triggered by trying to figure out how to pay a $5,000 fine for painting her front door the wrong shade of beige, the very same shade the HOA had approved just 2 years earlier. When I found her lying on her kitchen floor, she was clutching a pile of violation notices, her cheeks still wet with tears. That memory hasn't left me since. So when I had to move after helping cover the cost of her funeral, I chose Lakeside Manor because the rent was low. I thought, how bad could another HOA be? I was about to learn just how much worse it could actually get. Sofia Martinez had been running operations in the neighborhood for 4 months by the time I arrived, though I didn't know it then. All I knew was that within my very first week, I received a violation notice that made my stomach drop. It looked exactly like the ones that had haunted Mrs. Rodriguez. Same phrasing, same absurd fine, same smug tone about preserving neighborhood standards. The alleged violation? My pickup truck. It wasn't some rusty junker. It was a clean, reliable 2015 Ford I'd chosen because it could haul my work equipment. But according to Sofia's letter, I had broken Regulation 12.4 for having a commercial vehicle improperly parked in a residential area. The fine? $1,800 plus $150 in processing fees, and a warning that if I didn't pay within 10 days, there would be escalated enforcement. I just stared at that notice, hands trembling. It felt like Mrs. Rodriguez's ghost was beside me, whispering, "Told you so." But I had something she didn't: a background in software engineering. I knew how to investigate systems, trace problems, and find hidden patterns. If this was a scam, I was going to prove it. If it wasn't, then I needed to figure out how to prove my truck wasn't actually in violation. So I called the number on the notice. The woman who answered had a voice like honey over broken glass. "This is Sofia Martinez, HOA President. How may I assist you?" When I explained my confusion, her tone instantly changed from syrupy sweet to sharply condescending. "Mr. Davis," she said, "I understand that some residents struggle with our community standards, but ignorance of the rules is not a valid excuse." That line, ignorance of the rules. It was word for word what had been told to Mrs. Rodriguez. The hair on my neck stood up, but I stayed calm. "I'm not trying to be difficult," I said. "I just want to understand the rule I've broken so I can fix the issue." She laughed. "Mr. Davis, the issue is your attitude, but I do appreciate your attempt to learn. Perhaps you'd like to volunteer on the compliance committee? It might help you understand how proper community management works." In that moment, it hit me. This wasn't just about rules. This was predatory behavior. Every instinct told me to run. Instead, I heard myself say something that would change everything. "You're absolutely right, Mrs. Martinez. I would like to volunteer." Silence. For a second, I thought she'd hung up. Then her voice returned, still sweet, but now with a hint of satisfaction. "Well, Mr. Davis, that's exactly the spirit we like to see. Come to the HOA office tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll show you how real leadership works." When I ended the call, Connor looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Dad, why are you helping the woman who's scamming us?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that Mrs. Rodriguez had died feeling hopeless, and I refused to let anyone else suffer the same way. If I could get inside their system, I might be able to take it down from within. If I could get inside their operation and understand how everything functioned, maybe I could uncover evidence that proved what they were doing was illegal. Maybe I could stop the AMA before someone else's life was destroyed by fear and stress. Maybe, broken bar, just maybe, I could finally make something right. Have you ever tried to fight a corrupt system from the inside? Drop your thoughts below, because the next day, I was about to find out if I'd just walked blindly into the Lion's Den broken bar or taken the first step toward exposing the biggest HOA scam this town had ever seen. Walking into the HOA office the next day felt like stepping into hostile territory, except this enemy smiled like your friendly next-door neighbor. The office itself was nothing fancy, tucked between a nail salon and a tax prep service in a rundown strip mall. Hardly the image you'd expect for a group managing a neighborhood of 200 homes. Sophia Martinez welcomed me with a smile that didn't even try to reach her eyes. Without wasting a moment, she handed me a thick pile of paperwork. "Organization is essential in proper community management," she said, as if reading from a script. My stomach churned the moment I glanced at the papers. Every single notice was a carbon copy of the one I had received. Same violation numbers, same excessive fine amounts, same cold threats about escalated enforcement. As I sifted through the files, my software engineer instincts kicked in. Patterns began jumping out clear as day. 23 violations in just 4 months, and every single one targeted recently divorced individuals, senior citizens, or single parents. People who were too tired, too broke, or too overwhelmed to fight back. Then came the real breakthrough, thanks to Elena Vasquez. She was the part-time secretary at the office, working just 3 days a week. Elena was 78, wore magnifying glasses that made her eyes seem huge, and had a sweet but slightly confused manner, like someone trying her best in a world that had left her behind. When I came in for my second day as a volunteer, she handed me a filing cabinet key with a warm smile. "Oh good, you're the new official volunteer Sophia brought in to help organize everything." I didn't bother correcting her. Instead, I used the next hour to dive deep into the files, and that's when the full scale of Sophia's operation was laid bare. I found bank records showing HOA collections that didn't match up with the supposed fine payments. Emails and letters from other neighborhoods painted a clear picture. This was no isolated scam. Sophia had pulled the exact same scheme in 3 other communities over the past 2 years. But the most incriminating item? A spreadsheet titled Revenue Projections. It laid out detailed financial goals based on exploiting high-vulnerability residents, seniors, single moms, people mid-divorce. The numbers were mind-blowing. In just 4 months, Sophia had siphoned $23,000 from our neighborhood, and according to her files, she'd pulled over $40,000 each from Riverside Gardens and Maple Heights before resigning for personal reasons right before the financial questions started rolling in. While I traced this paper trail, my son Connor became my digital backbone. He was 17, a natural with phones, cloud apps, and all the tech stuff I still struggled with. While I still printed emails to read them, he was showing me how to protect our digital evidence. "Dad, you have to back everything up," he told me, "and start recording your calls with these people." He set up automatic cloud storage for my files and showed me how to discreetly record audio on my Phony HOA without looking like a clueless boomer. But the real turning point came during that weekend's community barbecue. That's when Danny Rodriguez, Sophia's boyfriend and self-proclaimed enforcement coordinator, decided that a few beers were all he needed to start running his mouth. I was flipping burgers and minding my business when Danny swaggered up beside me, radiating the kind of forced confidence that only comes from insecure men with borrowed power. "Davis," he said loudly, making sure the whole neighborhood could hear, "glad to see Sophia finally got you trained on how things work around here." He chuckled, then gestured toward a man in uniform helping himself to a hot dog. "That's Officer Garcia, real tight with us. He makes sure local law enforcement knows to mind their own business when it comes to home matters, if you catch my drift." Danny kept talking of more beers, more bragging, and the more he drank, the more reckless he got. "The trick's in the target," he boasted, thinking my silence meant admiration. "Single moms, old folks, people going through a breakup if they don't have it in them to fight. Hit 'em with a couple violations, crank up the pressure, and bomb a easy payday. We've perfected the system." I nodded like I was listening intently, all while my phone, tucked in my shirt pocket, recorded every damning word. By the time Danny wandered off to harass someone else, I had a 20-minute recording of him laying out the entire scheme of fraud, intimidation, even police corruption. That night, I played the audio for Connor. His eyes widened. Broken bar, this is huge. We need to go to the cops. But then we remembered Danny's casual flex about Officer Garcia. Calling the local police didn't feel safe anymore. That's when Connor had another idea. "Let's call Uncle Mike." Mike had been my wife's brother. Mike had always been our go-to man for anything that needed strategy, planning, or staying calm under pressure. A former Navy SEAL, he was the type of guy who didn't panic or he calculated. That night, I called him and played the full recording of Danny's drunken confession. Mike's response came instantly, sharp and tactical, just like the soldier he used to be. "Alexander," he said, "this falls into federal fraud territory. You don't need local police here, especially not if they're compromised. You need real law enforcement. But first, you need solid evidence." From that moment, I poured myself into gathering proof like it was the most critical debugging task of my career. This time, I wasn't trying to fix a software glitch, I was trying to expose a corrupt operation. Luckily, Elena, sweet, forgetful Elena, still thought I was officially part of the team. She gave me access to files I should have never seen if Sophia had been paying attention. I copied everything: bank records, spreadsheets tracking violations, email chains with other neighborhoods. Connor digitized it all, organizing files, sorting by date, building a digital fortress of undeniable truth. We were no longer just suspicious of this was now documented fraud. But the true turning point came from Elena herself. One afternoon while I was filing, she nervously adjusted her oversized glasses and whispered, "Sometimes I wonder if these violations are even necessary anymore." She told me she had been working with HOAs for 15 years and had never seen anything quite like this. Then came the sentence that froze my blood. "Sophia mentioned we might have to do a compliance inspection if Mr. Davis keeps asking too many questions." I tried to keep my expression calm. "What exactly does that mean?" I asked. Elena looked uncomfortable. "I'm not sure, Broken bar," she said. "It might be at night, you know, when you're not expecting it." She said sometimes residents need a more direct lesson about following authority. The way she repeated it like she was just parroting words she didn't even fully grasp, it told me everything. This wasn't about rules or property violations anymore. Sophia was planning something far more serious. Have you ever stumbled onto something way bigger than you were prepared for? In a drama-esque community, what's the most dangerous situation you've ever uncovered accidentally? Tell us in the comments below. That night, I made another call to Uncle Mike. I paced around my kitchen for nearly an hour, trying to convince myself Elena was just confused. But as soon as I heard Mike's steady voice on the line, I knew this wasn't just paranoia anymore. After I explained everything, Elena's warning, Danny's confession, Mike went quiet. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but unmistakably serious. "Alexander, this is no longer about HOA violations. These are organized criminals who've likely bought protection from someone local. They've already used threats and fraud, and next comes physical intimidation. They're planning to scare you into silence." His words made my chest tighten. "This could lead to a break-in," he continued. "You need to document everything. But more importantly, you need to prepare for what might happen next." That's when Connor, who'd been quietly listening from across the kitchen, finally spoke up. "Uncle Mikey, a broken bar. What if they come here? To our house? What should we do?" There was a long pause on the line. "Connor," Mike finally said, "your dad and I need to talk about how to make the house secure, but the most important thing for you is this: if anything happens, go straight to your room, lock the door, and call 911, immediately." After Connor went to bed, Mike and I had a conversation that no parent ever wants to have. He explained something I should have realized sooner: people like Sophia and Danny don't back down when someone threatens their scheme, they double down. The fact that she was talking about nighttime compliance inspections, that meant she was preparing to use fear or worse to shut me up for good. Then Mike hit me with a question that stopped me cold. "Have you thought about the possibility that they might try to enter your house?" I felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I'd been so focused on exposing their scam, on building a legal case, that I hadn't really considered that this could escalate into actual violence. "Mikey, a broken bar. Are you saying they might break in?" His answer chilled me to the bone. "Alexander, they've already stolen $23,000 from just your neighborhood. Do you really think they'll let one persistent software engineer ruin their entire operation without a fight?" And then he said something I never expected but would prove to be the most important piece of this entire story. "I've been teaching Connor some basic safety stuff during his weekend visits," Mike admitted. "Nothing extreme, just how to stay alert, how to think defensively. But a broken bar. I've also taught him how to handle a firearm, a basic safety, nothing more." I nearly dropped the phone. "You what?" "Mikey, a broken bar. Connor's 17. When were you going to tell me that you've been training my son to use a gun?" Mike didn't get defensive. Instead, he explained it with calm logic, the kind that's terrifying because you know it's true. "After what happened to Mrs. Rodriguez, I realized there are people out there who prey on families like yours. I wanted Connor to have the tools to protect himself and to protect Shua if it ever came to that." Mike had been clear. If things ever went south, the biometric gun safe in my bedroom was plan B. And Connor? He already knew the code. The next morning brought one of the strangest and most emotional conversations I've ever had as a parent. Connor sat at the kitchen table, looking like two people at odds: a teenage boy who once asked me to check under his bed for monsters, and a young man who now understood that sometimes monsters wear fake police badges. "Dad," he said, "I wanted to tell you about the training with Uncle Mike, but he thought it was more important that I learned everything first, then we could talk." I tried to absorb what I was hearing. "Connor, how much do you actually know about firearms?" His response was steady, deliberate, the kind of calm that doesn't come naturally at his age. Mike had trained him well. Uncle Mike started with safety, always safety first, then how to handle one responsibly, how to know when it's for protection and not for threats, and most importantly, how to stay calm if things go bad. He told me that a broken bar, if bad people ever came to our house, and you couldn't protect us, it might fall on me. It was the strangest thing, and knowing my son had this knowledge made me feel both relieved and terrified. Relieved, because he wasn't as defenseless as I had assumed. Terrified, because the idea that he might need to use those skills was quickly turning from a paranoid scenario broken bar into a very real possibility. That afternoon, Elena called. Her voice was a whisper, shaky and filled with dread. "Mr. Davies, a broken bar. I just overheard Sophia and Danny talking. They're planning something for tomorrow night. They kept saying you needed to be taught a lesson. They said something about 3 a.m. and a surprise inspection." "Yeah, I don't think this is about HOA stuff anymore." I thanked her and hung up, my heart pounding in my chest. Connor was already standing in the doorway, eyes focused. Not scared, not confused. Prepared. Broken bar. "If they come here tomorrow night, what's the plan?" That should have been my sign to grab him, pack a bag, and leave town. But I couldn't. Instead, I said something that still echoes in my head. "Connor, a broken bar. I can't run from this. If we don't stop them, they'll just move on to the next family, do to them what they did to Mrs. Rodriguez." That night, we did something no father and son should ever have to do. He prepared our home for an invasion. Connor walked me through the steps Mike had taught him: how to reinforce the entry points, where to position ourselves for the best protection, what to do if someone actually forced their way inside, and most of all, what to do first: call for help. Then document whatever you can. Use force only if there's absolutely no other choice. I kept looking at my son, this kid who should be worrying about college applications and math homework, and instead a broken bar he was explaining defensive tactics like a trained adult. "Connor, a broken bar, when did you grow up?" He looked at me with quiet strength. His answer broke something in me. "I think it was when I realized you were out there trying to protect people. Broken bar the same way you always protected me, and that sometimes protecting people means being willing to fight back." Neither of us slept that night. Connor kept his phone fully charged, double-checked every camera Mike had installed around the house. I made sure our old landline still worked just in case the cell towers got knocked out, and we both glanced, again and again, toward the locked bedroom closet. Inside, the biometric safe Mike had insisted I install months ago. A broken bar back then I thought it was overkill. Now, it felt like our last line of defense. Have you ever stood on that linear, the one between backing down and standing your ground? Tell me, broken bar, what did you choose? Because by 10 p.m. the following night, Connor and I were back at the kitchen table. We didn't speak much, just sat there, alert to broken bar hearts pounding, a broken bar eyes on the hallway clock. We knew that within a few short hours, our quiet little life was about to change forever. At exactly 3:06 a.m., the world split open. I know the time because I was staring straight at the microwave clock when it happened. The front door didn't knock, it exploded. Not a warning, not even hesitation, just a deafening crash, the entire frame torn apart by what I recognized as Danny Rodriguez's boot. The wood cracked, the hinges flew, and behind him came the screeching sound of a crowbar ripping straight through our threshold. 4 figures burst into the living room in black clothes, flashlights slicing through the dark like searchlights at war. "Police, HOA Enforcement." "Nobody move." Danny's voice, loud, slurred, angry. It took my brain a second too long to process what was happening. They weren't real cops. Their vests were mismatched. Their police patches looked ironed on from a costume store. Danny's vest was crooked, his badge cheap plastic. The 3 men behind him, hired muscle, local guys, probably scared out of their minds. They moved awkwardly, like they didn't even know what tactical meant. "Connor, go to your room. Call 911, I shouted louder than I ever had in my life. My voice cracked from the fear, because this wasn't paperwork anymore. This wasn't a scam. This was a full-blown home invasion. And somewhere, through the haze of panic, every instinct in me narrowed down to one thought: protect my son. Connor darted down the hall, gone in seconds. From the corner of my ear, I heard the soft thud of his door shutting and the low click of the lock. He was in position. We were out of time. The slam of Connor's bedroom door echoed through the house. At least one of us was sticking to the plan we had drilled into memory. Danny stepped forward like some puffed-up peacock, all false authority and fake confidence. He shoved the laminated paper right into my face. "Community compliance inspection," he sneered. "We have full authority to enter this property and collect overdue fines." At a glance, it looked official, a fancy border, seals, bold lettering, but up close, it was a joke. A document anyone with a printer and a trip to a copy shop could whip up, the kind designed to scare people too overwhelmed to question it. "Please," I said, hating the fear in my own voice, "just don't hurt my son. I'll pay whatever you want. Just leave him out of this." Danny laughed, a cruel, smug sound, the kind that feeds on power over others. "Oh, we're collecting all right," he said, "but first, you're going to learn what it means to respect authority and follow community rules." And then everything changed. I heard the creak of a door opening behind me. Connor. My heart jumped into my throat. Why wasn't he staying in his room like we planned? But when I turned, what I saw didn't just surprise me, it shook me to the core. There stood my 17-year-old son in the hallway, calm, focused, steady. He held our legally registered firearm in both hands, his stance controlled and confident, exactly like Mike had trained him. "Step away from my father," Connor said, his voice clear and even. "I've already called 911. Officers are on their way." Danny's response was instant and expected. "Put the gun down, kid," he barked. "You don't want to make this worse for yourself." But something changed in Danny's eyes. Real fear. He wasn't expecting this. Uncle Mike hadn't just shown Connor how to use a firearm safely, he'd trained him how to hold ground, how to project authority, how to command a room in a crisis. Connor wasn't flinching, he wasn't stammering, he wasn't acting like a teenager, he was acting like someone who had rehearsed this moment down to the last detail. "Sir," Connor said, "you and your associates are trespassing on private property. You're dressed in fake police uniforms, which is a federal crime. You're using forged identification and just committed forced entry." He listed their offenses like he was reading a case file in court. Danny's crew started shifting, one of the guys nervous, fidgeting, clearly regretting every second of this. Joe began backing toward the busted doorway. "Danny, a broken bar, this is too much, man. You didn't say anything about the kid being armed." But Danny, in typical fashion, doubled down instead of backing off. "He's bluffing," he growled. "Kid probably doesn't even know how to use that thing." What Connor did next still gives me chills. Without breaking eye contact, he subtly adjusted his grip and said, "Sir, I've been trained by a former Navy SEAL in firearm safety and home defense. If you take another step toward me or my father, I will shoot you in the leg to disable you, and I will hold you until the police arrive." He said it like a seasoned professional. And just like that, all the fake confidence drained from Danny's face. He realized it too late that this wasn't some panicked teenager he could bully. This was someone ready for this exact momenta and absolutely willing to act. "You wouldn't dare?" Danny muttered, but his voice had lost all edge, replaced by disbelief. Connor answered with steady authority, "You broke into our house in the middle of the night wearing fake police gear. That makes this armed trespassing during a felony. I am within my legal rights to defend myself and my family." His voice didn't tremble once. "This is your final warning. Back away and get out." Now, in the distance, I heard sirens. Fast, close. Connor had called 911 the moment the door blew open, and it wasn't just us. Apparently, several of our neighbors had heard the crash and called too. Danny's crew didn't wait. They bolted, one by one, disappearing out the broken doorway without so much as a backward glance. But Danny, he made the worst decision of a night already stacked with bad ones. He lunged straight toward my son. The gunshot that followed wasn't the booming sound you hear in movies. It was a sharp, cracking blast that tore through the air, loud enough to leave my ears ringing. Danny collapsed to the floor, screaming in agony, clutching his leg. Blood spread quickly across the hardwood. "Dad, are you okay?" Connor asked, still standing in position, his aim steady. Even while Danny writhed on the floor, Connor didn't lower the weapon, not until backup arrived, not until it was over. The other three, gone. They left Danny behind without a second thought, just like the cowards they were. I looked at my son, my voice barely holding steady. "Connor, a broken bar, when did Mike teach you all this?" Connor didn't take his eyes off the target, didn't waver. "Uncle Mike said I might need it one day broken bar to protect you, to protect us." The Coast Guard spent a while aboard, collecting statements, checking IDs, and documenting everything with their body cams and handhelds. While all this was happening, news helicopters started circling overhead as someone had clearly tipped off the local media about the in-progress boat theft. This was about to explode across every major news outlet, and Rebecca knew it. I could see her turning her face away, trying to hide from the cameras. Too little, too late. This story was going viral whether she liked it or not. And Amanda? She hadn't stopped talking since the officers boarded her, explaining herself to anyone who'd listen, clearly desperate to distance herself from the whole mess. Eventually, the Coast Guard gave the signal and my boat was to be escorted back to shore. Not a suggestion, an order. So now, there she was, Rebecca Sterling, the self-appointed queen of neighborhood order, being hauled back to the marina under federal watch, looking every bit the disgraced figure she'd become. What was meant to be a glittering display of her leadership had transformed into a front-page scandal complete with choppers and flashing news cameras. And the real twist? This was only the beginning, because federal boat theft isn't something you just walk away from, it's serious. And Rebecca was about to learn it the hard way. With both Rebecca and Amanda now in custody, and the chaotic boat bash plastered all over the internet, most people assumed this story had hit its climax. They were wrong. Jake still had no idea that the biggest bombshell hadn't even surfaced yet. It was still hidden locked away on Helen's phone. The question was, what had she been sitting on for half a year? Feels like something straight out of Anna Dramenest. Got a theory? What do you think Helen's been keeping under wraps? The next morning, I was bombarded with notifications the moment I picked up my phone. The story had gone fully public and every news outlet in town had picked it up. The headlines were absolutely brutal. Whole leader arrested in boat theft sting. I wasn't shedding any tears over it, but what really had me hooked was the social media fallout. All those shiny little videos Rebecca's friends had posted during their boat party, yeah, those were now key pieces of evidence in a federal investigation. The irony was amazing. The same footage meant to showcase their successful community event would now be exhibited in court. Then came the curveball. Amanda Sterling, Rebecca's once loyal sister, the one who used to follow her everywhere like a lost puppy, had apparently had enough. As I scrolled through my feed, I saw her public post. It wasn't just a resignation from the HOA board, it was an apology, a big one. I was manipulated by my sister. Jake Morrison deserves justice. I never should have gone along with taking something that wasn't ours. She tagged me, too. I honestly didn't expect that. I thought she'd disappear quietly and wait for things to cool down. But Amanda wasn't done. Next, she appeared in a televised interview on the local news. I watched the clip on my laptop. She looked shaken, but resolute. She told the reporter, "I trusted my sister completely." She said Jake gave us permission to use the boat for the community celebration. If I'd known she lied, I never would have set foot on it. When asked what her next move was, Amanda didn't hesitate. "I'm moving out of Rebecca's house, and I'm not sure our relationship can survive this." That's what you call real family fallout. But Rebecca wasn't about to take it quietly. She called an emergency home meeting that same evening. I made sure to attend. I needed to see for myself what she'd tried to pull. The community center was overflowing of more people than I'd ever seen at one of these meetings. Rebecca walked in looking like she hadn't slept in days. But she still tried to project that familiar air of command. She stepped up to the mic and launched into her speech. It was a dramatic mix of self-defense and deflection. According to her, I was a spiteful neighbor trying to tear down our community spirit. This whole thing, she claimed, was a big misunderstanding that had gotten out of control. But no one was buying it anymore. When you've got Coast Guard officers arresting someone and helicopters filming the whole thing, misunderstanding doesn't really fly. People in the audience began asking tough questions. Questions like, why didn't you ask permission before using Jake's boat? Why did you lie to Amanda and the other guests about having everything arranged? Is this the only time you've misused community property? Or are there other incidents we don't know about? Rebecca tried to respond, but she was unraveling fast. Her grip on the room was slipping, and that's when Helen Rodriguez stood up. Remember Helen, the board member Rebecca ousted 6 months earlier? She'd been sitting quietly the entire meeting. Now, she rose to her feet, and there was something different in her eyes. Determination, fire, truth. She stepped forward and addressed Rebecca directly, her voice cutting through the tension. "I think everyone deserves to know the real reason you kicked me off the board." Silence. Helen walked to the front, phone in hand. The whole room was watching, holding up the device. She said, 6 months ago, after you forced me out, you made some very interesting phone calls. You tried to scare me into staying quiet, but I recorded those calls, Rebecca, because I know sooner or later you'd lie about everything. Rebecca's face turned pale, and everyone else in the room, they leaned in to hear what came next. "I knew you'd try to bury me to protect yourself," Helen said firmly, and I'm sitting there, stunned, thinking, the Helen's had recordings this whole time? But as I processed it, it actually made perfect sense. Helen had once confided in me how afraid she was of Rebecca, afraid of backlash, afraid of legal threats, afraid she'd be crushed. But now, seeing Amanda speak up and watching the community finally turn a skeptical eye on Rebecca, it gave Helen the strength to stop hiding. Facing the room, Helen continued, "I stayed quiet because Rebecca threatened to destroy me if I ever revealed what I knew. But after what she did to Jake, and after watching Amanda find the courage to speak her truth, I can't stay silent anymore." Rebecca tried to jump in, but the room erupted. People were shouting, demanding to hear what was on those recordings. One person stood up and called for a full audit of the HOA finances. Someone else suggested a vote to remove Rebecca right then and there. The chaos was electric, but in the best way, the kind that happens when people finally stop letting fear dictate what they say. And Helen? She looked more at ease than she had in a long time, her posture strong, her voice clear. "I'll be handing these recordings over to the prosecutor handling Jake's case first thing in the morning." After the meeting ended, Helen and I stood together in the parking lot. She was still a little shaken, but I could see the relief on her face, like she'd finally taken off a weight she'd been carrying too long. Then she said something that floored me. "Jake," she said, "during one of those calls, Rebecca actually admitted she's been skimming money from HOA projects for years. She said, and I quote, these fools never look at the books anyway." And she laughed. She also told me she forced me out because I was asking too many questions about invoices that didn't add up. When I asked Helen why she hadn't come forward sooner, her expression darkened. "The last time I stood up to her, she slapped me with a harassment claim. It cost me $8,000 in legal fees. I almost lost my job. I couldn't risk it again." But the story wasn't finished, not even close. The very next day, I got a phone call from Mike, the HOA's treasurer, the same guy who's been handling the books for the past few years. He sounded on edge. "Jake," he said, "after last night's meeting, I went back over our financial records. There's a $47,000 invoice I signed off on for a playground renovation, a broken bar, but I drive by that park every day. Nothing's changed." He paused, and when I checked the contractor signatures, they all look the same. Like, identical. "I think Rebecca's been embezzling money." So now we had Amanda publicly breaking ranks with her sister, Helen preparing to hand over incriminating recordings, and Mike uncovering financial fraud buried in plain sight. Rebecca Sterling's little empire was collapsing fast. And the best part? It all started because she thought she could steal my boat and get away with it. Sometimes karma works in quiet, mysterious ways. And sometimes, it hits like a freight train, loud and undeniable. As Helen made plans to deliver her evidence, Rebecca was already making her next move. She'd hired the priciest attorney in town, but maybe, just maybe, this lawyer's entrance would expose something even bigger than the boat. And the drama nest followers. What do you think? Did Rebecca's defense just trigger her biggest mistake yet? A few weeks later, I found myself sitting in a federal courtroom, wearing the only decent suit I own. Rebecca walked in shortly after, flanked by a high-powered legal team that looked like they charged more by the hour than I made in a month. Leading the pack was her attorney, Thompson. The guy had the swagger of someone who never lost a case. Rebecca tried to appear composed, but it was obvious the stress was catching up with her. Her signature-polished look was unraveling a messy hair, noticeable weight loss. Amanda wasn't there. In fact, word had gotten out that Amanda had filed for divorce from her husband, citing the public scandal as a factor that had seriously hurt his business. The prosecution laid out their case clearly. They had GPS logs proving the boat was taken and entered restricted federal waters. They had video footage posted by Rebecca's own guests bragging about the boat party. There was testimony from me outlining the damage, and maritime law experts who explained exactly how serious it was to operate a stolen vessel beyond federal limits. It was practically open and shut. But then Thompson got up, and I'll give him credit, he was slick. He tried spinning the whole thing as a community misunderstanding, painting the boat incident as some innocent neighborhood tradition of shared resources gone slightly off track. According to him, I was just a bitter neighbor out to sabotage Rebecca because I couldn't handle her popularity. He even suggested that I had set her up, that I deliberately let them take the boat so I could turn around and cry theft. It was absolute garbage, but he was delivering it with so much confidence. I started worrying the jury might fall for it. And then came the surprise. Thompson called Amanda to the stand. I hadn't expected that. Amanda had made it very clear she wanted nothing to do with Rebecca. But she stepped up to the witness box. Amanda takes the stand, and Thompson begins steering the conversation toward HOA customs and past community events. She admits she genuinely thought I had allowed them to use the boat. "My sister told me everything was approved," she says. She said Jake was completely on board and happy to help support the event. Thompson uses that to reinforce his narrative of confusion and innocent intentions, and for a brief moment, it actually looks like Rebecca might squirm her way out of this. But then it's the prosecutor's turn for cross-examination, and that's where things take a sharp turn. He leans in and asks, "Miss Sterling, in all your time living in this neighborhood, have you ever actually seen your sister ask for permission to use someone else's property for an HOA event?" Amanda pauses. You can see her battling with the truth. Finally, she answers, "She always said she had permission." The prosecutor presses further, "But did you ever personally witness her getting that permission?" There's another long pause. Amanda lowers her voice. I trusted her to handle that." As Amanda speaks, Rebecca shifts uneasily. Her sister's testimony isn't doing her any favors. At best, it's neutral, and at worst, it's damning. But Rebecca still clings to the idea that her high-priced attorney can twist the narrative enough to get her off the hook. During a short break in the hearing, I overhear her whispering to Thompson, "This will pass. Jake can't prove I meant to steal anything. It's just his word against mine." She still thinks this is a game she can manipulate like always. That's when everything changes. The prosecutor turns to the judge and says, "Your Honor, we'd like to call a surprise witness, Helen Rodriguez." You could feel the tension in the room shift. Rebecca's face goes pale instantly. She clearly never thought Helen would follow through. Rebecca starts urgently whispering to her lawyer, but it's too late. Helen is already walking to the witness stand carrying a USB drive in her hand. She's visibly nervous, but there's a sense of quiet strength in the way she holds herself. When asked to explain her relationship to Rebecca, she calmly states she was a member of the HOA board until Rebecca forced her out 6 months earlier. The prosecutor asks her about the phone calls that followed. Helen explains, "Rebecca called me multiple times to threaten me, trying to silence me after I found irregularities in the HOA finances. I recorded those calls because I was scared she'd deny everything." The room goes completely still as Helen plugs the USB into the courtroom audio system, and then a broken bar Rebecca's voice fills the room. "These fools never check the books. I've skimmed over 50 grand easily in the last couple of years." Helen spotted something off in the invoices, so I had to cut her loose before she became a real problem. "And if anyone else tries to cross me like she did, I'll ruin them. I run this HOA, I run this whole damn neighborhood." You could hear a pin drop. Jurors glance at one another in disbelief. Thompson looks like he's just been sucker punched. And Rebecca? She bolts upright, shouting, "That's an illegal recording. She's lying. This is a setup. Helen's been planning this for months." The judge slams his gavel, warning her to settle down or risk being escorted out. But the recording isn't over. Rebecca's voice plays again. "That boat thing with Jake couldn't have worked out better. I'm using this community event to show everyone I'm the one making things happen. People like Jake need to learn that this is my neighborhood. He should feel lucky I'm letting him be part of our success." Right there, clear as day. She didn't borrow the boat by mistake. She took it to send a message, a show of control. The prosecutor lets that moment sink in before turning back to Helen. "Miss Rodriguez, did Rebecca ever tell you that she got Jake Morrison's permission to use his boat?" Helen doesn't hesitate. She looks Rebecca dead in the eye and says, "Number." She laughed about it, said, Why should I ask? I'll just take what I want." "What's he gonna do about it?" Thompson tries everything. No objections, motions, attempts to discredit the recording, but it's over. Rebecca's voice just confirmed everything. Theft, embezzlement, threats. There's no legal sleight of hand that can clean this up. The jury heard her confess. They heard her laugh about stealing from her own neighbors. They heard her brag about ruining anyone who opposed her. As the recording ends, I glance toward the gallery. Amanda is in tears, hands covering her face, repeating quietly, "I can't believe she used me. I defended her a broken bar and she lied to me the whole time." Even some of the home members who came to support Rebecca are standing up and walking out. They can't bear to hear another word from the woman they once trusted to lead them. Rebecca's carefully crafted persona, shattered, her lies, exposed, and Anna Drama's follower. So this is just the beginning of the unraveling. They heard here loud and clear, "A thief and a manipulator," straight from her own lips. Rebecca's attorney instantly pivots, scrambling to talk plea bargains and damage control, anything to keep this from going to a full trial. but it's far too late. That recording is officially part of the evidence now. Her own words confirm the embezzlement. And the boat theft charges, they just became airtight. Rebecca Sterling believed she was beyond reach and that her influence could get her out of anything. But federal crimes don't care who you are in the HOA, and federal judges certainly aren't impressed by neighborhood status. As I'm walking out of the courthouse, I run into Helen in the parking lot. She looks strained but finally at peace. I should have come forward sooner, she tells me. I was terrified of what Rebecca might do. But seeing you stand up to her gave me the courage. I tell her she did the right thing. She smiles, really smiles for the first time since I met her. You know what? She says, I'm not scared of Rebecca Sterling anymore. Rebecca thought her lawyer had crushed Jake's case, but then those courtroom doors opened, and someone entered holding a USB drive. Who do you think walked in with evidence that could dismantle everything? That USB held something that changed it all. 2 weeks later, I return to that same courtroom, but now for Rebecca's sentencing. The atmosphere is completely different. No polished legal strategies, no courtroom dramatics. Her lawyer had no choice but to accept a plea deal. Trying to challenge that audio would have been legal suicide. Rebecca is now pleading guilty to federal charges for stealing the boat, and to state charges for embezzling HOA funds. Now the judge will determine just how long she'll be locked away. Rebecca doesn't even resemble the woman we saw at the start. Her sleek blonde bob is gone, replaced with an uneven chop that looks self-inflicted. She's lost a noticeable amount of weight, and her clothes hang awkwardly on her frame. But more than anything, the arrogance is gone. That smug, untouchable energy has vanished. She keeps scanning the room, like she's hoping someone will come rescue her, but hardly anyone is there. Amanda is nowhere to be seen. She moved out of state, changed her last name, and cut all ties. The judge begins with the boat theft. Ms. Sterling, he says, you took Mr. Morrison's boat without permission, used it in federal waters, and caused considerable damage. But what elevates this case is the evidence that your actions weren't accidental. They were driven by entitlement and the intent to intimidate. He hands down an 18-month federal prison sentence for the boat theft. Honestly, more than I thought she'd get. But then comes the embezzlement. The judge's tone shifts. These crimes represent a serious betrayal of public trust. He continues, you stole $78,000 from your own neighbors, using your role as HOA president to conceal your fraud. You created fake bills, forged contractor approvals, and diverted funds meant for community improvements into your own accounts. He then sentences her to an additional 24 months in state prison to be served consecutively, not at the same time. That means she's facing a total of 3.5 years behind bars. But he's not done yet. Ms. Sterling, the judge adds, you will also repay the full $78,000 to the HOA, along with an additional $15,000 to Mr. Morrison for the damage to his boat and business. Then comes the final blow. You are permanently barred from holding any leadership role in an HOA within this state, the judge announces, and upon your release, you will complete 400 hours of community service. He is specifically focused on educating others about ethical community leadership. I'm sitting in the gallery, watching it all unfold, and I'll be honest, I feel a mix of satisfaction, a broken bar, and something else. Maybe it's sadness. Don't get me wrong. She absolutely earned every part of her sentence. But watching someone's entire life crumble because they couldn't stop bullying people, it's sobering. This all started because she thought she could just take my boat. Now she's going to prison for over 3 years. That's a heavy price for what began as neighborhood drama. After the sentencing, I finally learned what happened to Amanda, and honestly, her fall might be even more dramatic than Rebecca's. 3 days after Rebecca's arrest, Amanda's husband filed for divorce. He said the scandal was destroying his professional reputation and he couldn't risk being linked to the Sterling name any longer. Amanda lost her job at the real estate firm she'd been with for 8 years. So clients didn't want anything to do with someone tied to the HOA scandal. Eventually, she was forced to sell her home at a financial loss and move away. She moved back to the small town she'd grown up in. But here's the twist I didn't expect. Amanda reached out to me a few months later. She sent me a long email, filled with sincere apologies and an honest explanation. She wrote about how Rebecca had dominated and manipulated her for years. I never questioned my sister. She wrote, "I always assumed she was smarter, more capable. I just followed her lead, but now I see that I was a grown adult who should have known better. I'm deeply sorry for the harm my blind loyalty caused." Amanda also mentioned that she had started volunteering with a nonprofit that supports victims of financial abuse, using her experience with Rebecca to help others identify manipulative behavior. Back in our neighborhood, change was in full swing. The emergency HOA election to replace Rebecca drew the largest turnout we'd ever seen. Helen Rodriguez was elected unanimously as the new HOA president, and one of her first actions was implementing strict transparency measures for all spending. Now, any invoice over $500 must be approved by 3 board members, and all financial documents are open for community review. They even created a hotline so residents could voice concerns about HOA leadership anonymously and no more fear of retaliation. And that playground Rebecca had claimed to renovate with $47,000, it finally got the makeover it deserved, funded properly once the insurance came through. Next to the new swing set and jungle gym, the community placed a small plaque, dedicated to transparent leadership and community accountability. It doesn't mention Rebecca, but everyone knows exactly what it's about. Some say it's petty, I say it's a necessary reminder. Leadership is about serving people, not ruling over them. About 6 months after the sentencing, Helen organized something she called Truth and Transparency Day, basically a neighborhood cookout where residents could celebrate the new direction and share stories from the past. I was stunned by how many people stepped forward with their own Rebecca horror stories. Turns out, she'd been throwing her weight around for years, fining people for tiny infractions, threatening lawsuits, even trying to run people out of the neighborhood. One elderly couple told me she threatened to foreclose on their home over a $15 late fee. Another family said she tried to ban their teenage son from the community pool just because she didn't like who he hung out with. That's when it hit me. This was never just about my boat. This was about a long-standing abuse of power. I just happened to be the one who said enough. If I hadn't stood my ground, she would have kept embezzling funds, intimidating residents, and treating the whole like her personal empire. In a strange way, her decision to mess with my boat might have been the best thing that ever happened to our neighborhood. For the Truth and Transparency Day celebration, I decided to do something special. I brought out my boat to my beloved Ocean Justicia and offered free rides to anyone who wanted one, but I'd made one small change. Remember the nameplate on the back that used to say Ocean Justice? Now it reads, Justice Served Daily. And every time someone asks what that means, I get to tell them the whole wild story. That day was perfect: clear skies, calm water, and a community that finally felt united again. Helen gave a powerful speech about how strong communities are built by leaders who serve, not control. A few neighbors shared stories of standing up to bullies in their own lives. When it was my turn to talk, I kept it simple. Sometimes, I said, you have to stop being the nice guy and start being the person who draws a line in the sand. And when you do, you'll be surprised how many people stand behind you. As the sun set and I was cleaning up the boat, Helen walked over to me. Jake, she said, I know this all started because Rebecca stole your boat, a broken bar, but I hope you understand that you saved this community. People were scared of her, but more than that, they were scared to speak up. You showed us all that bullies only have as much power as we let them. I told her I just wanted to protect what was mine. She shook her head. No, she said. You protected all of us. You just didn't realize it at the time. And that's how a simple act of theft brought down an entire HOA dictatorship. Rebecca Sterling thought she could take what she wanted without facing any consequences. But life has a way of delivering consequences whether you're ready for them or not. Sometimes those consequences involve courtrooms, federal charges, and prison time. As for me, I'm back to running my boat tour buzziness, and honestly, things have never been better. The media coverage brought in tons of new customers, and now I've got some of the happiest clients around. Turns out, people love supporting the guy who took down the local tyrant. So yeehaw, broken bar. That's how Rebecca Sterling found out that stealing a boat can land you in federal prison. The lesson: bullies only have power when you give it to them. Stand your ground, draw your line, fight back when you need to. If you enjoyed seeing Justice Served, hit that like button to support the Anna Dramanesque community. Thanks for watching and I'll catch you in the next one. Or why? Because Anna Drama Nest always has another twist waiting just around the corner. Hit subscribe, smash the like button, and stay tuned.